So on today's edition of Sports File, we're going to be taking a look back at the destruction of the Montreal Canadiens dynasty from the 50s and 60s and 70s in the 1979-80 season. Now, for most Montreal Canadiens fans, you remember a time when Montreal used to win the Cup every year or every second year, led by the incomparable Jean Beliveau and the Rocket Maurice Richard. Now, the team was loaded with talent, very dependable coaching, very great fans, and they changed the way that North America looked at the sport because they were the Flying Frenchmen. They were the best of the best. By 1979, the Canadiens were on their downturn of their fourth straight cup, led by role players like Bob Gainey and scorers like Steve Shutt, Guy Lafleur, and Jacques Lemaire. There was some indication they would have a possibility to run at 5 straight cups. Unfortunately, this didn't happen. The 1979 season was full of controversy and bad play, especially during the middle part of the season, and management felt maybe there was changes needed. Some of the players that were part of the Habs for a number of years also decided to move on that season, especially goalie Ken Dryden. A lawyer by trade, Dryden felt dissatisfied from his last season in Montreal, probably the weakest year he had as a Montreal starter, and eventually retired at the end of the year. He went back to his law degree efforts and also became a commentator for ABC and also did the Olympic USA-Russia hockey game. Very great call, him and Al Michaels. Now, at the time, Dryden and his fellow longtime teammates, including Larry Robinson, Steve Shutt, Serge Savard, some role players like Rick Chartres, and people like Guy Lapointe were starting to feel the age. Lapointe was injured for most of the 79 season, and there was nagging injuries to most of the role players on the team and the major stars. And the flower, Guy Lafleur, was also on a downturn as well. He had some personal problems still yet to be figured out. He's never really confessed if his nightlife led to some massive problems off the ice. But on the ice, he was still a consistent 50-goal scorer. Now, the 79 Cup was at home against the Rangers, one in the 5-game series. And for many, some believe that's not only one of the best, not say come from behind series, Montreal, the most gritty they ever won. Mario Tremblay, Doug Risebrough, Jacques Lemaire, Pierre Mondu, Yvon Lambert, all the stars and role players and second and third liners worked together for a great finish. Now, for many, many people, they felt that Jacques Lemaire should have deserved the Conn Smythe for that championship trophy. Jacques had a very consistent season. He's marked with excellence all he's played. He seemed to come along in the Rangers series. He had a big goal in Game 5. Now, here's where the ironic thing occurs. We were all anticipating that Lemaire would get the Conn Smythe trophy. Didn't happen. Who got the Conn Smythe trophy? Well, I got to hold that for a few seconds because you're going to be shocked. You would never think a player of his caliber being so defensive would be a scoring or a leader, but Bob Gainey, of all people, got the Conn Smythe trophy and was heralded and put on the shoulders of his fellow teammates. Now, for many watching the game, we weren't disappointed that Gainey got it, but we're just wondering how Jacques Lemaire would react, because Lemaire was still thinking about his career with the Canadiens. I think he wanted to have a better role, maybe be considered by management for a longer-term contract. And you have to remember, at the time, the Montreal Canadiens were fighting, high prices, the dollar exchange. Certain players were asking for better contracts because late 70s were all about that. Now, as this occurred when the off-season started, it was announced that Jacques Lemaire would not be returning to the team. And I think this is the biggest piece of the foundation they needed to continue, besides Dryden, to keep that dynasty together. Lemaire had so many big goals on the road, especially. Ask any Chicago fan or any Boston Bruin fans what Lemaire could do outside the forum. He was not intimidated by any other rink, as we say. I met Jacques Lemaire at the Russia-Canada tournament in Campbellton in the early 90s, and I asked him about that, and he said he really enjoyed his time in Montreal, but for some reason, playing on the road for him was easier because there was less media hounding him in every game, and the fans on the road basically really liked his style of play. Now here where it becomes crazy. When Scotty Bowman left the team to go on to better climes in Buffalo, a Montreal Canadiens veteran by the name of Boom Boom Geoffrion was asked to take over the team. Now Boom Boom was a nice guy, but he had no chance to coach Montreal. He didn't have the personality or temperament because he was always felt he was overshadowed by the Rocket during their years, and he had a love-hate relationship with the Montreal media. And he had a love-hate relationship with some of the players on the Habs, especially sniper Pierre LaRouche, who Montreal had picked up from Pittsburgh in a trade a couple of years before for that ever crazy Peter Mahovlich. Allegedly, Geoffrion saw Mondu smoking a big cigar after a final game, and that maybe led to his downfall. But guess who came in next? The longtime Canadiens assistant coach Claude Well, who was a good coach, but he was not a leader of men. He was basically a good second coach, an associate coach, what you call now. But Geoffrion and Ruel's record as coaches seemed to be consistent with Montreal's 45 to 50 wins. But the biggest problem they had was replacing Dryden. Michel Larocque was a carryover from the previous dynasty. He was Dryden's backup. And he tried to augment Larocque with a few new goalies. He never traded for a big goalie to be the number one or backup. They kind of went an indirect route to replace Ken Dryden. Actually, 4 goaltenders were in the mix. Richard Sevigny, who is kind of an AHL player for them. Rick Wamsley, who was a draft pick in 1979, a capable player, but no number one goalie style. And of all things, one of the goalies with the worst goals against average in the 1970s, another Pittsburgh and Kansas City knockoff, Denis Savard, of all people. Now, Denis wasn't a bad goalie, but he was known for having some really rough games. Now, all 4 goalies in the mix, there was no number 1, no number 2, no number 3, no number 4, and that destabilized the Montreal Canadiens style. We needed big saves from Ken Dryden to keep them in the game or to make comebacks. Now, here's the major headache of the year. They had an opportunity to draft Denis Savard as the best junior French player of the year. And instead of taking Denis Savard, which would have been another Jean Beliveau for the Montreal Canadiens, would have helped him into the new dynasty of the 1980s, they picked a nondescript player, an okay player, but somebody no more than 20 goals a season, they were predicted, called Doug Wickenheiser. There was too much pressure on Wickenheiser to be the English Denis Savard in Montreal, and although he played with Lafleur a number of shifts per game and played with the top players, he was not what Montreal needed. So all these factors were playing together to destroy the dynasty piece by piece. Into the playoffs, Guy Lafleur was injured, and the first round he played Bobby Hull and Gordie Howe with the Hartford Whalers, or New England Whalers, won a 3-game sweep, but the cracks in the foundation were there. By the time the second round came along, they faced a very strong opponent in the then Minnesota North Stars, or now the Dallas Stars. In that series, the first 2 games went to Minnesota. Montreal made a brave comeback, but with bad goaltending by Larocque in Game 6 and some terrible goaltending in Game 7, Minnesota won an elite goal in Game 7 to stop the Canadian dynasty. Now, they could have won 5 straight cups in 1980, but again, all these faults led to that lack of repeat, as we say. But the 79 season will be looked at as the first down year of the dynasty, even though they won the Stanley Cup that year. But major problems were around the corner. As you can see by the ring in front of you, those 4 cups have never been seen since, except for the Islanders, of course, and the Oilers. So, the Oilers 4 and 5. Anyway, our next podcast will talk about the biggest chip off the dynasty, which was led by the trade of Rod Langway and Brian Engblom for basically 2 players that didn't pan out until the 86 season. Anyway, have a great day. Merry Christmas. Bye.